pressed 981. We hope the stories will align in that sense. But in the meantime, you're tuned into Smooth Breakfast with Ayo Mario Esse.
And Valentine Ohu. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. It's time for us to go into detailed analysis of our newspaper stories. Joining us this morning to do justice to these stories are Cheta Wanze. Good morning, Cheta.
What's good about the morning?
The fact that I'm here.
You are
and Ayo is
violating
here.
my rights.
By
I'm
how-
sweating
how?
this morning already,
No, I'm
and
not
it's just
violating your rights,
7:30.
please.
Sorry, sorry.
And
You
I'm
don't-
not in charge of your activity. Mr. C, good morning.
Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Naira. Good morning, Cheta.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lagos. And here's wishing everyone a happy.
See, feel good Friday voice. That's what we like to hear.
I'm sweating. You're telling me to feel good.
If you'd like to join the conversation this morning, send your message to WhatsApp 0809 444 0981.
Yes, we're streaming live on YouTube, so you can use the platform to share your messages as well as watch the interesting faces of Mr. C and Jetta. Good morning.
All right, let's move on to our first story here. Hush puppy, hush puppy. Valentine and I don't know when we had the conversation on this story, but I'll let you talk, Mr. C.
No,
and
first
let
of
our
all, Mr. C
listeners-
asked me something instructing. I promised him I was going to give him my plug today
Please,
because he was
give him
asking
the
about my
Oh, your
my
tailor.
tailor. Yeah,
Honestly, the way you dress to work,
Yes.
it has to be commissioner level. No, in fact, IG.
IG level.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right,
That's a good compliment.
let's now go on to our story. Inspector
is
General of Police, Alkali, orders investigation into AbbaKyari's role. The Inspector General of Police has ordered an internal review of the allegations against AbbaKyari, a celebrated Nigerian police officer.
By who?
Mr. Kyari, a deputy commissioner of police, was indicted by U.S. authorities as part of the investigation of alleged fraudster Ramon Abbas, popularly called Hush Puppy. Now, this news was viral yesterday. It was viral. Please turn off Jessa's mic. This news was viral yesterday, Mr. C, when you broke. Hush Puppy is singing like a bird in a plea deal to, in terms of the U.S. and his indictment, his trial. Now, he's mentioned a prominent police officer in Nigeria. Now, funny enough, he was in the news very recently for going to Oba with Obi Kubana, and he gave an explanation for that. And now he's in the news for not very good news. But please tell us, take us through the story.
Okay, so we are all aware of Ramon Abbas, popularly known as Hush Puppy, a suspected Nigerian fraudster who was indicted and arrested by U.S. security agents and moved to the U.S. And he was subsequently charged with several counts of money laundering, business email compromise frauds, amongst other things. And Hush Puppy has recently pled guilty and is awaiting sentencing by the judge. Now, the sealed court documents were unsealed on Monday, the 26th of July, 2021, and the other defendants were listed. And one of the defendants listed is a certain Mr. AbbaKyari, who was described as a deputy commissioner of police in the Nigerian police force. At some point, he was in charge of the disbanded Special Anti-Robbery Squad for the nation, and is currently the head of the Inspector General's IR Internal Response Team. Now, the allegations. Now, first to the story, the IGP has ordered an investigation, whatever that means, into the charges raised against Mr. Kyari by the U.S. government. Now, what are those charges? Mr. Kyari is described by the U.S. government in the court documents unsealed as a serious risk defendant in the charges against Hush Puppy and his co-conspirators. And what is his alleged offense? That he caused to be arrested a certain Nigerian individual who had revealed to a Qatari national who was the ongoing victim in a fraud case, in a fraud perpetrated against him by Hush Puppy and his accomplices.
His name is Vincent.
And that individual as well, he was part of it.
And the individual, the said individual, was also involved in that, but due to an alleged disagreement with Hush Puppy as with regards to the sharing formula for the alleged 1.1 million US dollars received from the Qatari national, the alleged individual, Mr. Chibuzo Kelly, directly contacted
The Kataga.
the Qatari victim, and alleged that Hush Puppy and his accomplices were fraudsters and
So-
was trying to persuade him to rather deal with him.
Him.
Now, the US government in its court documents alleges that Hush Puppy then reached out to Mr. Kyari with instructions to arrest the said Mr. Chibuzo. And they further allege or show in the court documents messages purportedly coming from lines registered to Mr. Kyari that he had carried out the instructions. They said Mr. Chibuzo had been arrested and he had asked for confirmation of the identity of the individual he had arrested, to which Hush Puppy also allegedly confirmed the identity of the person arrested. Now, the US government alleges that Mr. Kyari's alleged conduct in arresting the said Mr. Chibuzo allowed that fraud to continue and for the Qatari national to continue to transmit and transfer funds through Hush Puppy and his co-conspirators. And based on that, he is a party by virtue of aiding and abetting the crime of fraud. And they have
When you say he, who? Who
Mr.
is?
Kyari.
Okay.
That is a position, that is a case of the US government.
All right.
And they've issued an arrest warrant and have asked that Mr. Kyari be arrested here by the Nigerian authorities and made available for
To the
transfer.
FBI.
Yes. Now, these are still all allegations. But the key difference.
Bear in mind, though, Hush Puppy has pleaded guilty.
No, he's pleaded guilty. Now, so there are a couple of takeaways for us and for our security agencies, our law enforcement guys here. First of all, many of us, or some of us, were not aware Mr. Kyari was under investigation.
Yes.
Now, the documents have been unsealed, and now there is a case for him to answer. If this was being done in Nigeria, it will be all over the news. They will bungle the investigation. But furthermore, it is a serious question, and it's a serious indictment for a so-called celebrated super cop to be accused of crimes like this.
And the
The
response.
fact that he's even being accused calls into question, one, his integrity, two, calls into question his conduct as a police officer, and then throws into question previous cases he has handled. Because in serious countries, for something like this, you then have to call up every single case he has worked on and start your investigations to see whether he conducted himself properly.
So
Also-
let me.
okay.
So I was going to say, so why the reason why he's called celebrated is because he's said to have been the mastermind behind the arrest of Evans and
Thank
Wadome,
you.
who are both kidnapped kingpins, and so he won the hearts of many a Nigerian. Now, in terms of what has come to light, like what you have said, it then brings to question. Unfortunately, it's tainting.
May I?
But don't. But I have mentioned though that I don't want us to speak as if he's guilty because he has come out to deny the allegations. It's just an allegation.
So no. So the allegations, and for now, there is no court statement affirming his guilt. However, because he has been accused, and these are crimes that are very serious in nature,
Yes.
it is expected that he would voluntarily make himself available to clear his name of the serious charges.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cheta.
Yeah, for me, I want to just point out that there were people, especially during his stewardship in SARS, there were people who had raised questions about him. So, but it all goes to show, because I mean, for those who know the security services, he was actually on sort of like a fast track to become one day an Inspector General of Police. So this all goes to show things that we ought to take seriously, things such as internal affairs and all of that, whether we do take them serious. Because at the very least, as far back as 2014, there had been allegations about his conduct with SARS, with respect to SARS. And back on 17th October 2020, Premium Times published a major investigation in which he was, at the very least, alleged to have been negligent in the disappearance of people with respect to SARS.
So final point, this is a good opportunity for the government to burnish its self-acclaimed anti-corruption credentials, make Mr. Kyari available to have his day in the U.S. court and clear his name.
Thank you.
It's not going to happen.
Thank you. We look forward to that happening. Terrorism. Buhari assures British Prime Minister of non-interference with the judicial process.
This one we can knock out very quickly.
Talking about anti-corruption. He also mentioned that it's interesting that Baroness Scotland stressed that President Buhari was a champion of anti-corruption in Africa. The Commonwealth also developing anti-corruption benchmark tools. Just wanted to mention it since you talked about anti-corruption, Mr. C. But the meat of this is that they had the Prime Minister of
For those who don't
Britain.
know, Baroness Scotland is the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, an ineffective organization, if you ask me.
All right, thank you for that clarification, Cheta. All right, so this was bilateral talks on the sidelines of the Global Education Summit in London, which the President is currently attending. The two leaders said it was important that the judicial process ran without interference, no matter who was involved.
But see, this is just, I can't choose what I want to say on breakfast really. Basically, there are so many proven cases of the government interfering with the judicial process. So not just in terrorism, but in everything. Let us start with Zakzaki, who finally was released yesterday evening after years of being in detention
5 years.
illegally. How many court orders were there to release him? At the last count, at least 8. Ignored all the time. Let us talk about intimidation of judges. So, for example, going to attack the houses of judges late at night or very early in the morning, of which not one of those judges has been even brought to trial. Talk less of there have been accusations, but as in put in the dock to try. That can qualify as judicial intimidation.
No, actually, some of them have been arraigned.
Arraigned. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, who? It's just Nguta.
Well, even if it's one person, someone
Often, yeah,
has
Jude
been.
Mogobia.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, thirdly, let us talk about, say, the process of declaring IPOB a terrorist organization didn't follow due process. So these are the trying to find the right words here. These are the kind of things that basically put the lie in this kind of statement. You routinely try to suborn all arms of the government, not just the judiciary, but even the legislature, who have caved in and very gladly let themselves become an appendage of the executive. We have actually sleepwalked our way into an autocratic government. That is the fact. And in terms of terrorism, the fight against terrorism, we are not doing well, which is why the next the media is actually the next line of attack. So hence, for example, the directive from the NBC saying, oh, don't quote and unquote glamorize what the terrorists are doing. This week that is just ending, terrorists have kidnapped soldiers. Terrorists have kidnapped naval personnel. A total of 9 officers have been kidnapped by terrorists this week.
All right. So thank you very much. It's interesting that we're going to talk about a legal case this time involving the APC, talking about not interfering with the judicial process and how well this government has done.
Can I take
Let's
a few
take some
messages?
messages.
Tony from Ikeja says the hush puppy case is a confirmation that 99% of those who claim to fight crime in Nigeria are criminals. Again, those who claim to lead the country, he said, maybe looters. Dan from Okuda, or Dan Okuda rather, says, good morning. He said Mr. Abba should be extradited to the United States without further waste of time. Barrister Dan, thank you. Tajuddin says, please help me remind Mr. C that Kyari is a Nigerian and the president's boy. Fabian from Ekpe says, excuse me, in Senate climes, Mr. Kyari would have stepped down and focused on clearing his name first. Unfortunately, this is Nigeria as always. We're all watching.
All right, let's move on to our next story, Mr. C. NSIA, that's the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, to invest $200 million in world-class hospital 20 other projects nationwide. The NSIA is said to have concluded plans to build a world-class hospital in Abuja as part of efforts to strengthen the country's healthcare system. It's also developing 20 other health projects in the areas of cancer, radiology, and diagnostics nationwide to support Nigeria's comatose health sector as part of its health intervention initiative. Now, Mr. C, seeing this headline, it elicits some form of excitement, joy. However, before you talk about building new infrastructure, you want to ask what is being done to the old, because they say that the broom that was used to flog the old wife is waiting for the new one. So if we don't have a maintenance culture, what is the point of investing millions of dollars in new infrastructure when we haven't sorted out the old?
Okay. So thank you. It's good. It's good and interesting that you mentioned the total absence of a maintenance culture in Nigeria. And that is what initially crossed my mind. So I'm going to start this way. Kudos to the NSI for even starting to invest in its various healthcare initiatives. Yes, we are aware that the existing hospitals are grossly underfunded, grossly under-equipped, and it's a very dire situation. However, for the situation to improve, something must start somewhere.
Yes.
Now, it is good that they're investing in a world-class hospital. Before we can get to maintain the hospital, there must be something to maintain, first of all. Now, maybe they have taken the viewpoint or the perspective that we can't correct what has gone bad in the past, but we can start to correct it from a new perspective. So this world-class hospital, we welcome it because according to the NSIA, it's going to be a center for medicine. And if we look at the caliber of people who are administering and operating the NSI on a daily basis, these are proven individuals with verifiable track records. And I believe they're engaging the proper experts and professionals post-construction to ensure that this world-class hospital doesn't go the way of its predecessors.
Like the one in Akwa Ibom.
Now, yes. And furthermore, it was instructive to know that we now have a world-class cancer center in Idiaraba. I didn't know that.
It's been there. It's just that the equipment are being attacked by rats.
No. But according to the NSI,
there's a difference between having a world-class center and having world-class people
Manage
there.
them.
At the end of the day, there's a Hausa saying, you build Muslims, not mosques. We have this thing of liking to build brick and mortar without building the actual people who will manage them, which is why we are bleeding doctors like there's no tomorrow. Why? See, if I have friends who are doctors, I'll be wondering what they're still doing here. Yes, granted, I live here, so I'd want to have. I don't want the one that I'll go to hospital for headache and they'll give me chloroquine for headache instead of Panadol.
But same could be said about Kenya, right? Well, guess what is happening right now? Uhuru Kenyatta has signed a deal with the UK government to have their doctors and nurses cross into the UK without having to, seek any extra.
And what did he do before going to the UK?
That's the real question.
The first thing he did was he acknowledged we cannot pay you guys, so you guys can go, but please come back on a regular basis as often as you can to help. So they sort of have an arrangement where doctors of Kenyan stock, and even it's also open to doctors from out of Kenya, sort of like people like this something of they will do something so everybody will say, oh, he's humanitarian. So they come back, work in hospitals that donate some of their time, and then go back to base.
At least there is an acknowledgement first.
So I was just going to round up. And it's interesting Cheta said what he said. It's one thing to start all these beautiful investments, but beyond the brick and mortar, like Cheta said, we have to work on getting the right people, the right skills, because it will be a big shame if you have these wonderful brick and mortar buildings and you do not have the right caliber of people to administer them.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. C. All right, next story. Cheta, I'll come to you. Defense Minister blames monarchs, clerics for insecurity, says troops compromise. The Minister of Defense, Major General Bashir Magashi, has blamed these people for the growing banditry, insurgency, and other vices in the country. He said this yesterday during a one-day security summit in Oka, Anambra State. Well, what do you think of this? Do you think they're really the ones to blame
It's
for
easy to
rising
throw away
incidents?
the baby with the bathwater, but there is some truth to what he's saying, especially with clerics. I would have liked if Mr. Magashi said this in the north, because if you hear the amount of nonsense that, especially Izala clerics, there's a sect Izala clerics say on a routine basis, they are responsible for radicalizing a lot of people. So in that respect, he's right. But having said that, and then in Zamfara, at the last count, at least six traditional rulers, so-called traditional rulers in Zamfara and two in Katsina, have been found to collude with bandits. So in that respect, he's right. But having said that, what about the responsibility of the government? So you have, I mentioned that we have eight traditional rulers who have been found to be colluding with bandits, with so-called bandits, because you can't call people who are shooting down Air Force planes bandits. They are terrorists. Let's call them
Yes.
what they are. The What has happened to those traditional rulers? This is where the government, which is a part of, comes in. Nothing. Those traditional rulers were just suspended. You have evidence that these people were colluding with these guys who come and attack your people and all of that, or come and attack people and all of that. You just suspended them. Nobody has come in front of the court. Nobody has. So, what are we talking about? What about the so-called de-radicalized Boko Haram members that they've quote and unquote absorbed into the military?
Yeah.
What are we talking about? So when you treat those people with kid gloves, is it any surprise that insecurity persists? It has become an enterprise, and there's more than circumstantial evidence that government people in the government that he serves actually have beneficial arrangements with these so-called bandits.
And let me tell you what he's asked them to do, and I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah,
such a
yeah.
big statement. He called on those instigating violence in the country to desist forthwith.
Please, what does that mean?
Interesting, Leon. This day has this report, Mr. C, that the Honorable Commissioner of Health, Lagos State, Professor Aki Abayomi, has said that Lagos is presently under severe stress and strain of the third wave of COVID-19, as the state diagnoses between 100 and 300 cases every day. He made this known at a place that he was invited to represent the governor at an event at the launch of the Medin Pharmaceuticals Limited in Lagos. But what are your thoughts regarding this, especially his statement and the third wave and the reactions to it?
Okay, so it is true, despite what some people still think and suggest in Lagos, there is a third wave of COVID-19 in Lagos State, and it is a bit more severe than previous strains. Now, the Commissioner for Health has re-emphasized the need to fully follow the non-pharmaceutical interventions, and this is a clarion call to everyone resident in Lagos and even other states. Wear your face mask, adopt the elbow greetings, take every necessary precaution. Now, with regards to the testing of 100 and 300, that is very low. But again, you can only test the people who come forward. Since there's no law compelling or making it mandatory to be tested, it's what it is. But please, let's do all we can. Let's observe the social distancing parameters so that we can quickly get over this third wave and hope that there's no subsequent wave.
I had a scare 2 days ago.
Yeah.
I've not been feeling well. And I had to go get tested. I saw my doctor run a series
You
of
did
tests
responsible.
and did a responsible thing. So, but I tested negative. Shut up. So
Check
I'm
that.
back.
Oh my days. OG from Ikeja says the cancer center in Diaraba is both world class in equipment and personnel. My dad was a patient there and was at par with the cancer center we used in Tel Aviv, Israel. For Richard is still wondering if are we still on this blame game? Somebody is blaming another in this administration. If they have identified the real causes of the security issues, they should address them.
And this one from Conrad. Conrad says the DSP, or the issue of DSP Kyari, as his allegation indicted by the FBI, should open up cases of past EFCC chairman and chairwoman who were indicted of corrupt allegations but no prosecution. Celebrities should get ready to exonerate themselves from one, being called, from being accessories to hush puppies philandering. Thank you, Conrad. Let's move on to our next story. Unregistered sponsored pro-government NGOs thriving in Nigeria. This is according to an investigative report by Premium Times. Cheta, what are your thoughts?
No, it wasn't an investigation report by Premium Times. It was off a paper by the Carnegie Endowment's Matthew Price, who is a researcher Matthew Page, who is a researcher at the Carnegie Endowment. He used to be a U.S. diplomat in Nigeria. Since he left, he's been working with the Carnegie Endowment, and his research work has focused exclusively on Nigeria. I will say that when I read the paper, because I read the full thing, I was jealous. The research was top notch, although he did make one or two errors, but hey.
The paper is it's titled Fake Civil Society, The Rise of Pro-Government NGOs in Nigeria.
Yes. Now, my only quarrel with the paper really is that it focused heavily on this administration or this regime, whichever you want to call it. Because if he had started, he did acknowledge that this industry started under Babangida and then blossomed under Abacha, before it was constrained under Obasanjo and then began to expand again under Yaradua. But it really got a breath of life and began to assume all sorts of proportions under this government. Because one thing for example, these are examples that I have witnessed personally. Once we went to I was part of a group, went to Abuja to go to Unity Fountain to complain about something. Getting to Unity Fountain, our way was blocked by the police. And then suddenly another group of yahoos, that's the only thing I can call them, came and they were shouting something else. Basically calling us traitors and all of that. And then later not up to noon, when everybody was leaving, we saw those guys who had been there they were lined up collecting money. And then do you want to talk about the rather embarrassing situation of a so-called group that appeared a few weeks ago? Because one of the things that Mr. Page talked about in his paper was the fact that many of these groups appear, do one press conference or two at the most, and then disappear. You never hear from them again. Yeah. There was some group, a coalition of Igbo professionals in support of Buhari, that appeared and did a protest about not quite 3 weeks ago. First red flag, they spelled Igbo as IBO instead of IGBO, Igbo. There's no Igbo group that will spell it like that. And then all the women in that group were wearing hijabs. All of them. I mean, we now have a complete cottage industry of people who do counter protests for real issues. So there was a Twitter, there was the rather inane Twitter ban which has cost the country a lot. People organized this sort of protest. Their path to the Unity Fountain was blocked. That same day, another group came out and with full police support, they were protesting in support of the Twitter ban. And then that group that's protesting in support of the Twitter ban
got police support.
Got police protection.
That's interesting to note.
Google that group. They've never existed before. There's no trace of them. And then after that protest, they've vanished.
You can call them influencers, Jetta. You know they are influencers like that. I mean, they are influencers, right?
Yeah, people.
I think I should go into that line of business. Yeah. Sorry, I paused because when he said it just occurred as a gear clicked in my head. See, business. Anyway, so it's at the end of the day, these are because what it does is that civil society is very, very important and vital for democracy, because you need a watchdog to watch the government. But if you have all these kind of groups, the first effect it does is that it destroys the trust of the public in genuine civil society actors.
That's right.
And the moment the public trust is destroyed in genuine civil society actors, then it becomes an all-comers game.
That may very well be the motive behind the sponsoring of such groups.
Well,
I can't, discount the fact that
in the report, again, I encourage you to read it. It's free to download. In the report, he named some of the sponsors. He was very clear, as in he clearly spent rigorous researching, spent time talking with so many of them and all of that. And he said it is mainly government SEs that sponsor these groups in order as a PR stunt for their principals.
Damage control. Thank you, Cheta. Thank you, Mr. C.
There are better ways for PR. Let me just put it out there
Yes,
because
please.
if you need suggestions, I can help you. So
Mm.
please call me.
Please, I can testify to that.
Ethical way,
Mhm.
ethical PR.
Feel Good Friday
Thoughts.
indeed. Thank you so much for listening and for watching. For those on Instagram Live, for those on YouTube, thank you so much. We acknowledge you, Sifre Ashe, Babafemi Onagweson, for your message, Olariwaju as well, for your messages on YouTube. We'll maybe take some of them before we go into our Feel Good Friday
Yes,
conversation.
yes, we'll probably take some of them.
For Lagos Talks 981. Chata is at Checkstar on social media. Mr. C is at D Mr. C. Good morning.
Union Bank. Your
Thank
simpler, smarter bank.
Welcome. Hey.